Have you ever wondered what you would do if everything you know and love disappeared? This question echoes in my mind every day, a constant reminder of the fragility of life. My name is Ethan, and the story I am about to share is an emotional roller coaster, marked by loss, betrayal, and a desperate search for redemption. When I look back, I see a young man full of dreams, but also full of doubts and insecurities. I used to dream of being a great businessman, one of the most influential in the country. The idea of building something great that would leave a mark on the world consumed me. However, life has a peculiar way of teaching us lessons we never asked for. I grew up in a small town in the American countryside, where the streets were quiet but the air was always thick with expectation. My father, a successful businessman, seemed to have everything under control. He was respected and admired, but behind that facade, there was immense pressure to maintain that status. I felt like a shadow beside him, always trying to live up to his expectations, always trying to prove myself. The vulnerability I carried made me an easy target for comparison and criticism. And as I struggled to find my place, the dream of becoming a successful man seemed further away with each passing day. The landscape of my life was a minefield of challenges. The city, although charming, was rife with social divisions and prejudices. I saw friends and neighbors struggling to survive, while others, like my family, enjoyed a comfortable life. This dichotomy hurt me deeply and, at the same time, drove me to want to make a difference. What I didn't know was that the challenges I would face would go far beyond social barriers. They would come from within my own home. The central conflict of my story unfolded unpredictably. After years of hard work, my father decided he no longer wanted to see me in his shadow. He abandoned me without warning or explanation. And with that, he took with him not only my legacy but also the hope of a bright future. My father's betrayal left me devastated. I found myself alone in a city I had always loved, but which now became a painful reminder of everything I had lost. The dream of being a successful businessman fell apart like sandcastles, and I was forced to start over from scratch, without the guidance of the one who should have been my greatest support. The pain of betrayal forced me to reevaluate everything I believed in. How could someone I loved so much leave me so helpless? This question consumed me for weeks as I tried to rebuild my life and understand what it meant to be truly independent. The vulnerability that had once paralyzed me now turned into strength. I needed to find a new purpose and a new path. But even with this renewed determination, the shadows of the past continued to haunt my present. The fight for survival in a world that seemed cruel and unforgiving had only just begun. As the days passed, I realized that life was giving me a second chance. I began to connect with people who were also facing adversity, and thus I found a new form of solidarity. Together, we shared our stories, our pains, and our dreams. I learned that even in the darkest situations, the light of hope can shine through friendship and mutual support. What was a solitary battle now turned into a collective journey, where each of us carried the marks of our own struggle. But, like every story of overcoming, this journey was not without its challenges. With each step I took towards my new dream, the memories of my father and the betrayal I suffered became more intense. It was as if I was walking through an emotional minefield, where each memory could make me go backwards. Insecurity and fear of failure followed me, questioning whether I really had what it took to move forward. In the midst of all this, the crisis I experienced made me realize that life is about choices. Every decision I made from that moment shaped not only my future but also the future of the people around me. The fight for social justice and inclusion became fundamental pillars of my new journey. I didn't just want to rebuild my life. I wanted to help others find their voices, to overcome their own struggles. The story I am about to tell is an ode to resilience, overcoming, and the importance of human connections. A journey that led me to understand that even when everything seems lost, there is always a light that shines at the end of the tunnel. And most of all, it is a reminder that in our pursuit of success and happiness, we must never forget the lessons that life teaches us. It's time to go back to the beginning and relive every moment that brought me here, where pain and betrayal turned into opportunities for growth and transformation. The first steps in my new life were filled with uncertainties and challenges that seemed insignificant at first glance, but were actually like small obstacles in the path that forced me to stop and reflect. The first task I faced was the search for a job. With my savings nearly exhausted and the pressure to make ends meet, I found myself navigating a sea of opportunities that seemed promising but, more often than not, proved disappointing. Each interview I attended was a battle against the insecurity that had settled in my heart. I struggled to maintain my composure, but inside me, a storm of doubts raged. Did I have what it took? Would anyone give me a chance? I once went to an interview for a position at a small clothing store. The manager, a middle-aged man with a tired look, asked questions that put me under pressure. I was asked about my past experiences, and as I tried to explain my past, my father's betrayal echoed in my mind, as if reminding me that everything I had built up to that point was in ruins. When I left the store, not knowing if I had done well, a feeling of frustration came over me. Insecurity was a shadow that followed me for days, questioning my ability to start over. At the same time, I realized that I was not alone in this journey. At a local coffee shop, I met Sophia, a young woman who was also looking for opportunities. She had an infectious smile and a determination that inspired me. However, her life was not easy either. Sophia worked 2 jobs to support her family, and her stories of struggle reminded me that life is a battleground for many. And so a friendship began to form between us, bonded by our experiences. We shared our fears and frustrations, and even in the midst of the pain, there was a sense of comfort in knowing that someone understood the intensity of the struggle. Over time, I began to realize that the obstacles I faced were more than just challenges. They were opportunities in disguise. One night, as we were talking about our dreams, Sophia told me about a social inclusion project she was developing in the community. The idea of helping people get back on their feet after hardships resonated deeply with me. I felt that I needed to do more, that my experience of betrayal and loss could be turned into something positive. Together, we decided to work on this project, offering support and guidance to young people who, like us, felt lost. However, it wasn't long before the first signs of resistance began to appear. When we tried to organize a community meeting, we were met with indifference from some people who didn't believe that change was possible. Someone commented that life is too hard, making my heart sink. But Sophia's reaction was different. She stood up and, in a firm voice, began to speak about the importance of not giving up, about how each of us has the power to make a difference, no matter how small. Her strength inspired me, and I realized that the fight for social justice was not just an external battle, but an internal one as well. The experiences I had lived taught me valuable lessons, even if I didn't fully realize them at the time. Every small failure in my job search, every rejection at community meetings, were actually learning opportunities. I began to feel stronger, more confident. I learned to deal with my emotions, to transform pain into motivation. But at the same time, a part of me still carried the scars of my father's betrayal. The doubt about his decision and the impact it had on my life still haunted me. She expressed her concerns about Carlos's proposal, stressing that we should not alienate those who were already doubting the effectiveness of our project. For her, the power of change lay in building relationships, not confrontation. Seeing her determination to advocate for a more peaceful approach gave me some hope, but at the same time, tension between us and Carlos began to grow. After the meeting, I was approached by Carlos, who was clearly angry. He accused me of being weak and letting my emotions get in the way of progress. His words cut deep. I knew he was partly right. My hesitation was undoubtedly a barrier, but the way he addressed me made me feel like I was being criticized for something personal. My father's betrayal and the insecurity I still carried weighed heavily on me. I began to wonder if I really had the right to fight for social justice when my personal life was still in such disarray. The following days were difficult. The tension between Carlos and me was increasing, and the friendship between him and Sophia was growing stronger. I began to feel like an intruder in a space that had previously been safe and welcoming. The feeling of inadequacy was intensifying, and in a moment of weakness, I decided to step away from the project, convinced that my presence was only causing more problems. The voices of doubt echoed in my mind, and the idea of giving up seemed increasingly tempting. However, one evening, as I walked alone through the city streets, I saw a group of young people talking excitedly about an event we had organized. They discussed how they felt supported and empowered by our initiative. Their conversation ignited a fire inside me. I realized that despite the challenges and disagreements, we were doing something significant. The small changes we were making were having an impact. If I gave up now, I would not only be abandoning the project but also those who needed support. With this new perspective, I returned to the group, determined to face the challenges ahead. The battle would not be easy, but I knew I had to confront my fears, not just for myself but for everyone who was counting on me. The idea that each of us could make a difference, no matter how small, began to resonate within me. The emotional connection that had formed between us, despite the hardships, was stronger than any disagreement. The path ahead was still filled with uncertainty and challenges, but I now understood that true strength came not from the absence of fear, but from the courage to face it. And so, alongside Sophia and the new dynamic we were forming with Carlos, I decided that I was ready to fight for a better future, not just for myself but for everyone who dreamed of getting back on their feet. "You're going to be all right," I reassured her, kneeling beside her. The chaos around us settled, and the tension in the air shifted. Sophia joined me, helping Mrs. Maria to her feet while Carlos's voice faded into the background. "Let's get you somewhere safe," Sophia said gently, guiding her away from the crowd. As we walked, I glanced back at the gathering. The once divided group now shared a moment of subdued concern, their earlier enthusiasm replaced by a collective sense of responsibility. Once we found a quieter space, I checked Mrs. Maria over, ensuring she wasn't hurt. "I just got scared, dear," she said, her voice shaking. "It all feels so overwhelming." I nodded, understanding. "It's okay to feel that way. We're here with you." Sophia chimed in. "Our aim is to support everyone, especially those who feel lost in all this noise. You matter to us, and we want to create a space for everyone's voice." As we stood with her, I realized that this act of compassion was what we needed most. The demonstration was about more than just expressing frustrations. It was about strengthening our community bonds. With Mrs. Maria recovering, we prepared to rejoin the main event. I turned to Sophia. "This is what it's all about, isn't it? Making sure that everyone is seen and heard." "Absolutely," she replied. "We must remind ourselves why we started this in the first place." Rejoining the group, I saw a change in the atmosphere. The fall had shifted something within us all. Conversations shifted from confrontation to collaboration, with people discussing how to incorporate everyone's perspectives. Carlos was still passionate, but now there was an openness to dialogue. I approached him, my heart racing as I hoped to bridge the divide. "Carlos, I understand the urgency you feel, but we can't lose sight of who we are fighting for." He paused, taken aback by the intensity of the shared experience with Mrs. Maria. Perhaps he hadn't seen how his approach affected our community. "You've got a point," he admitted reluctantly. "But we can't sit idly by while injustices continue. Then let's channel that energy into something constructive," I proposed, feeling a sense of unity beginning to form, moving forward together rather than apart. The demonstration continued, now filled with a renewed sense of purpose. We organized our voices into a collective chant for solidarity, channeling the frustrations into declarations of hope and community support. In the end, the event wasn't a clash but a coming together of hearts and minds, a reminder that while our paths may differ, our goal remained the same, creating a better world for everyone. As I looked out at the crowd, seeing allies standing side by side instead of opposing sides, I felt the weight on my chest ease. The fears that had once threatened to overwhelm me were now intertwined with clarity. We had come to this place not as individuals, but as a united force striving for change. And that, I realized, was the power we needed to carry forward. "We were here to help," I said, trying to convey calm. Together, we helped the woman to her feet. The look of gratitude she gave was a powerful reminder of why we were there. To care for our community, to strengthen it, not to divide it. At that moment, I realized that impactful words could not replace the connection we were forming with the people around us. The fear and division incited were not what the community needed. The tears in Mrs. Maria's eyes reflected the vulnerability we all faced, and I understood that the fight for social inclusion couldn't just be about noise and confrontation. It was about building bridges. The demonstration, which began as a battlefield of ideas, turned into an act of solidarity. People started to join us, offering help and support to Mrs. Maria. The tense atmosphere began to dissipate, and voices that were once divisive became empathetic. The urgency to care for each other overcame the need to be heard at any cost. It was a moment of revelation that made me reevaluate my choices and attitudes. Carlos, on the other hand, seemed to have lost control. His insistence on maintaining a confrontational approach no longer resonated with the group, which had been rallying around the idea of caring and support. I watched him and felt sorry for him. He had become lost in his own rhetoric, unable to see the beauty that was unfolding. The new circumstances created by Mrs. Maria's downfall offered us a chance to rewrite the narrative of that demonstration. At the end of the day, as we sat down to talk, I realized that we were at a new starting point. The arguments between Carlos and Sofia still existed, but now there was room for more constructive dialogue. What had previously seemed like a stalemate was turning into an opportunity to reevaluate our strategies. The emotional impact of this event was profound. I felt rejuvenated, filled with a new determination to lead with empathy and collaboration. I knew that the fight for social justice was not easy, but true strength did not come from imposition, but from the ability to listen and connect. The demonstration had become a milestone in our journey, and I was ready to explore this new path, one that prioritized inclusion and care. The anticipation for what was to come was palpable. The climax of our collective journey was brewing, and I was determined not to let division tear us apart again. That day, I learned that the true fight for survival goes beyond words. It is in joint action, empathy, and solidarity that we find the strength to transform our circumstances and make a difference in the lives of those around us. The immediate aftermath of the turning point in the protest was intense. What began as a divisive event turned into a moment of unity. As soon as Ms. Maria stood up, surrounded by people offering to help, I felt a wave of relief mixed with new hope. The emotion was contagious. The fear that had previously hung in the air dissipated, giving way to a sense of solidarity. However, this new dynamic did not come without its challenges. Carlos, now isolated, was visibly frustrated. His speech, which had previously incited the crowd to act more aggressively, now seemed to be met with resistance. The tension between him and those who had rallied around Sofia and me grew, and I realized that the division had not disappeared, but had merely transformed. While the majority sought a peaceful path, Carlos was increasingly becoming a dissenting voice. I sensed that his resistance could become a new threat to what we were trying to build. I found myself in an emotional turmoil. The experience of caring for Mrs. Maria made me realize that the real fight was not just for justice, but also for dignity and humanity. The urgency of embracing our community became clear, but the pressure to maintain this new approach in the midst of such a polarized environment was a constant challenge. I wanted to be a leader, but I was also afraid of failing. Doubts began to creep in. Could we really unite everyone around a common purpose? And if Carlos decided to oppose us more aggressively, how would that affect our cause? These questions haunted me, but at the same time, I felt a sense of growth within myself. The experience of helping Mrs. Maria made me realize that true leadership lies in listening and connecting with people, not in imposing ideas. I began to feel more confident in my ability to inspire and motivate others to act with compassion. This new perspective also brought me greater responsibility. The fight for social justice was not just about me or Carlos. It was about all of us, and I needed to be an example of empathy and inclusion. Meanwhile, the anticipation in the air was intensifying. The demonstration that began as a battle of ideas now became a field of possibilities. The groups that were previously divided began to mix, and I knew it was time to act. I needed to find a way to channel the crowd's renewed energy into concrete actions. Voices that were once divisive were now calling for a better future, and I was determined not to let this opportunity slip away. My relationship with Sophia became a focal point. She, who had always sought a more conciliatory approach, now seemed more confident in her ideas. I saw her as a strong ally, someone who could help us navigate this new path. However, the tension with Carlos still persisted. He was not ready to give up his vision, and in later conversations I realized that this internal struggle could intensify. The friendship we had built was at risk, and this became a moral dilemma for me. Should I try to convince him to join us or move forward, even if it meant leaving him behind? The new obstacles were clear. The division that had once seemed ideological was now becoming personal. Carlos was hurt, and his frustration could put us at risk. The fight for social justice was intensifying, and I had to find a balance between maintaining unity and dealing with the conflicting emotions that were emerging. Social pressure was mounting, and the thought of failing and seeing this new opportunity go to waste was terrifying. Against this backdrop, I began to understand that the climax of our collective journey was approaching. Expectations and tensions were rising, and I needed to prepare myself for what was to come. The fight for the survival of our cause was at stake, and I was determined not to let anything stop us from moving forward. What would be the next step? How could we turn this new energy into something meaningful without letting divisions consume us? It was time to act. The protest had become a turning point not only for the community, but for me as well. I was ready to face the challenges ahead, and with renewed determination, I realized that true strength lies in the ability to unite people around a common goal. The future was full of uncertainty, but also of opportunity. I was eager to see how this new phase would unfold, ready to face whatever came my way. The fight for social justice had become not just a goal, but a journey of personal and collective transformation. Things were about to come to a head. The mood at the protest had changed, but the tension between the groups was still palpable. Carlos, in his frustration, was polarizing the crowd, and I knew this would be the turning point. He had the ability to turn anger into violence, and I couldn't let that happen. What was at stake was not just my friendship with him, but the integrity of the entire movement we were trying to build. As the crowd gathered, I saw Sophia approach, her expression determined. "We have to do something before this gets out of hand," she said, her voice firm. I nodded, but the sight of Carlos, standing on a high ledge, delivering a fiery speech, stopped me in my tracks for a moment. He was urging people to take aggressive action to fight back against a system they saw as oppressive, but I knew that fighting back was not the answer we needed. My hands shook as I considered the gravity of the situation. The crowd, for the most part, was seeking peace, but Carlos's words resonated with those who still felt abandoned and hopeless. It was now or never. I needed to confront him. Heart pounding, I walked toward him, feeling Sophia's gaze on my back, giving me strength. "Carlos," I called, trying to get him to stop. His expression of surprise quickly turned to disdain. "Do you really think we should just give in to this passivity? They won't hear a word of peace," he shouted, anger seeping through his words. Looking out at the crowd, I could see that many were still divided, but most were inspired by the message of unity we were trying to build. "This is not about surrendering, Carlos. This is about fighting with dignity, showing that we are more than anger and violence. If you continue on this path, you will push people away from us, and everything we have achieved so far will be for nothing," I said, trying to infuse a sense of reason into his fiery speech. The silence that followed was deafening. The crowd waited, and the tension was almost palpable. Carlos looked at me, and for a brief moment, I saw doubt in his eyes. Now was the time to use everything I had learned on this journey. This wasn't just my fight. It was all of ours. Look at Mrs. Maria, Carlos. Look at the people who came here today not to fight, but to unite. If you continue with this approach, you'll end up alone, and that's not what we want. We're all in this together. The crowd began to murmur. Some began to applaud, while others still seemed hesitant. The clamor for a peaceful path forward was growing, and I knew I had to act quickly. Let's unite. Let's show the world that we can be a force for change without getting lost in violence, I exclaimed, feeling the energy of the crowd shift. Carlos, now visibly shaken, hesitated. He looked at me, then at the crowd, and the internal struggle on his face was clear. It was the first time I had seen him vulnerable, and I could tell he was lost too. "Do you really think this is going to work?" he asked, his anger giving way to an uncertainty I never thought I'd see in him. "Yes, I do. I believe we can be stronger together. I believe we can change things without destroying ourselves in the process," I replied, my voice softer but firm. The crowd began to stir, and hope was reborn in the air. I felt the positive energy grow, and the connection that was forming was powerful. However, Carlos wasn't ready to give in yet. "You may be right, but what if this doesn't work? What if we fail?" he asked, looking around at the crowd that was beginning to gather around us. It was a valid question, and the doubt in both of us was the same. I knew there were no guarantees, but there was something I needed to share. "If we fail, at least we will know that we tried to do the right thing. And that is already a victory. We cannot allow fear to paralyze us. We must have the courage to fight differently, and that starts now, here in this moment," I said, feeling that each word was hitting its target. The crowd was now in a frenzy, and I knew that Carlos's decision could change everything. He took a deep breath, and for a moment, silence reigned. The tension was at its peak, and everyone awaited his next move. "Then let's try. Let's do this together," he finally said, his voice calmer but full of determination. The crowd erupted in applause, and I felt a wave of relief and joy spread through me. The climax of that demonstration was not only the overcoming of an external challenge, but also the resolution of an internal conflict that had accompanied me throughout the journey. Carlos and I were not just friends. We were allies in a greater cause. The fight for social justice had become a path of personal and collective transformation. The crowd's energy was now palpable. I knew that together we had overcome not just an obstacle, but a barrier that could have separated us forever. The emotion that permeated the air was a testament that we were stronger together, and the fight for dignity and humanity in our community had just begun. The emotional impact of that moment wasn't just mine. It belonged to everyone there. The expressions of hope and determination on the faces of those around us were proof that we were on the right path. The future was still uncertain, but the unity we created that day was a solid foundation on which we could build. And so, with renewed determination, we moved forward, ready to face whatever lay ahead, together. The crowd slowly dispersed after that decisive moment, but the energy still lingered in the air. Carlos and I exchanged a knowing look, a silent understanding that despite our differences, we were allies in something much bigger than ourselves. As the tension gradually dissipated, I realized that the fight for social justice we were waging was not just about protests and slogans, but about the transformation that could occur within each of us. Sophia came closer, the smile on her face reflecting the joy and relief I felt. "You got him to listen," she said, a twinkle of admiration in her eyes. "That was incredible." I thanked her, acknowledging that her strength during that critical moment had been crucial. There was a renewed connection between us, a recognition that we were all on this journey together. In the days that followed, news of the protest spread throughout the city. The way we were able to redirect the energy of anger into a call for peace and unity became a symbol for many. The group we formed not only continued to meet, but grew in numbers and strength. People felt inspired to bring their voices and experiences to the table, and that was deeply gratifying. Reflecting on that day, I realized that the journey was not just about external actions, but about the internal changes that occurred within myself and the people around me. I learned that true strength lies not in imposition, but in the ability to listen and unite. Carlos, who had previously seemed so distant and determined to follow a conflictual path, began to open up to new ideas. He became an advocate for peace within the movement, and his transformation was a powerful reminder that we all have the ability to change, even when we are stuck in our own convictions. The relationship with Carlos, which had previously been on the verge of breaking down, was now blossoming. We became more than friends. We were partners in the struggle. Our debates, which had previously been heated and divisive, became productive dialogues. he began to understand that the strength of the movement lay in the diversity of voices and the inclusion of everyone, even those who did not share his initial views. Sophia also found her place. Having always been a strong voice within the group, she began leading workshops on how to engage the community in a constructive way. Her passion for social change intensified, and she brought new ideas and methods to our meetings. Our friendship grew even stronger, and I realized how important we were to each other. The solidarity we cultivated was a solid foundation for facing the challenges that lay ahead. Reflecting on all of this, I realized that the fight for social justice was actually a microcosm of the struggles we all face in our lives. The transformation I saw in Carlos, the courage of Sophia, and the unity we formed were life lessons that extended beyond the borders of that demonstration. I learned that true change begins within ourselves, in the way we relate to others and how we choose to act in times of crisis. As a group, we decided that our next action would be a community event that promoted inclusion and active listening. We planned a day of activities that celebrated cultural diversity and encouraged dialogue between different sectors of the community. The idea was to not only continue the fight, but also create a space where people felt safe to share their stories and experiences. The day of the event arrived, and the energy was contagious. Laughter mingled with music, and the smell of home-cooked food filled the air. Seeing people come together, talking, and laughing was proof that change was possible. What began as a demonstration of discontent turned into a celebration of community and hope. As I looked out over the crowd, my mind wandered back to that fateful day when everything could have spiraled out of control. The look of doubt on Carlos's face was still fresh in my mind, but now it was replaced by a smile of excitement. What I had witnessed there was not just an event, but the beginning of something profound and meaningful. The connection between people was palpable, and I knew we were building something that could last. The journey was not over, and challenges still lay ahead. But now, with a new perspective and a united group at my side, I felt prepared. The fight for justice and dignity was a long road, but the transformation we had experienced gave me hope. What had once seemed like a distant goal now felt tangible, and I was ready to keep fighting, not just for myself, but for all of us. And so, we moved forward, with the certainty that together we were capable of facing any challenge, ready to transform not only our lives, but the lives of the entire community. Change was possible, and the journey had just begun. As I watched the excitement around me, I realized that the choices we made along this journey not only shaped our group, but also impacted the community in ways I never imagined. The energy of solidarity and hope that we had cultivated was now ingrained in every corner of the event. Voices that were once silenced began to echo, and the stories that were shared created a fabric of empathy and understanding that united us all. Carlos stood out, chatting animatedly with people who had previously been strangers to him. His transformation was visible. He had become an advocate for inclusion, and his gaze now reflected a new perspective on what it meant to be part of a collective. I remembered his words filled with doubt and resistance, but now he was surrounded by a diverse group, listening and learning from each of them. His change inspired me to keep going. Sophia, with her infectious passion, had become a natural leader. The workshops she led were not only spaces for learning, but also for healing. I saw how people came together in circles, sharing their experiences and finding strength in their vulnerabilities. What had once been a breeding ground for disagreements was now a place of growth and mutual support. Our friendships deepened, and I realized that we were building something much more than a movement. We were forming bonds that could last a lifetime. As the day progressed, I allowed myself to reflect on my own journey. The fear and insecurity that once gripped me were dissipating. I learned to listen and value diversity of opinions, and this made me realize that true strength lies in the collective. Each of us brings something unique to the table, and it is this diversity that enriches us. The fight for social justice, which once felt like a heavy burden, was now a shared mission, filled with hope and possibility. That event was a milestone, but it was not the end. The fight for justice and dignity still faced many challenges. As people dispersed after the event, a sense of determination filled the air. I knew we would need to keep working and coming together, but now with a new understanding that change starts within us and radiates outward. What we had built together could not be easily undone. Looking to the future left me feeling excited, but also aware that there were no guarantees. Social divisions still existed, and the challenges we faced were profound. Yet the hope that blossomed in our hearts was a powerful force. What had begun as an individual fight for justice had now become a collective movement, and I was ready to take on the next chapters of this journey. Reflecting on everything that had happened thus far brought me a deep sense of gratitude. Through the struggles and triumphs, I had learned the importance of empathy, active listening, and collaboration. These lessons not only shaped my outlook on social justice, but also affected how I viewed myself and others. I had found a greater purpose, and it filled me with hope and determination. The future was wide open, full of possibilities, and I knew this journey was far from over. The transformation I had experienced had prepared me for the challenges ahead. I was aware that some issues still needed to be addressed, and that the fight for justice would continue, but I now had the tools and support I needed to face whatever came my way. So as I looked around at the united community around me, I felt like we were just getting started. Change was possible, and our resolve was unwavering. With new bonds of friendship and renewed purpose, we were a beacon of hope, ready to face what lay ahead, together. The journey for justice and dignity would continue, and I was determined to be a part of this movement, not just as an individual, but as part of something much bigger. The story we were writing had many chapters left to tell, and I couldn't wait to live them. The journey I have been on has changed me in ways I could never have imagined. Looking back, every choice I have made and every step I have taken has led me to this moment, to the moment where I was finally able to face those who had wronged me. The vengeance that burned in my heart was not just a desire for retribution, but a need to restore the justice that had been denied to me for so long. The days of pain and anguish were not in vain. Every tear shed and every sleepless night shaped not only my resolve, but also my understanding of what it means to be strong. Along this journey, I have come to realize that strength lies not only in the ability to retaliate, but in the ability to stand firm in the face of adversity. I have learned that true victory comes from overcoming, not just from punishing those who have hurt us. When I finally had the chance to confront my enemies, the weight of the past seemed to follow me. It was as if each of them were present, not just in body, but as ghosts in my memories. But rather than letting me down, these memories gave me courage. I knew that the revenge I sought was more than just an act of retribution. It was closure, a chapter one needed to close in order to move forward. The confrontation was intense. The words we exchanged echoed in my mind for days on end. I didn't just face them, I exposed them. Every lie they had told, every betrayal they had committed, was laid bare before me and, more importantly, before them. I felt a surge of power as I realized that I finally had the ability to stand up and claim my place in the world. When it was all over, I had not only achieved revenge, I had found strength within myself that I never knew existed. As I returned home, a sense of relief washed over me. The burden I had been carrying had lifted, and the pain that had once seemed unbearable was now just a distant memory. I realized that this act of revenge was not just about getting even, but about setting myself free. The freedom I had found was not just physical, but emotional and spiritual. I had freed myself from the chains of the past and, in doing so, had discovered a new version of myself. Now, as I look to the future, I feel like I'm on a new path. What was once a path marked by pain and anger has become a path lit by hope. I can't deny that challenges still exist. The scars remain, but they don't define who I am. Instead, they are a testament to my resilience and growth. I'm better prepared to face whatever comes my way, not with anger, but with a new perspective. Within me, a flame of hope was lit. I learned that while revenge may bring some momentary relief, true power lies in the ability to move forward, to let go of the past and embrace new opportunities. What I truly desire now is not only to seek revenge, but to help those who, like me, need support to overcome their own struggles. It is time to transform pain into empathy and anger into compassion. The message I want to leave is that we all have the ability to reinvent ourselves, even after the most painful experiences. Life can knock us down, but we always find the strength to get up. I learned that true revenge is living well and moving forward, even when headwinds try to push us back. It's a continuous cycle of growth and transformation, and each of us has the power to become the best version of ourselves. As I look at the horizon, I feel like my story is just the beginning of a new journey. I left behind the shadow of revenge and embraced the light of renewal. I'm excited to discover what the future holds and how I can positively impact other people's lives. If I can inspire just one person to find their inner strength, then all my suffering will have been worth it. What matters is not what happened to us, but how we chose to react and the legacy we leave. And so, I move forward, with courage and hope, ready to face whatever comes.